Hi, and welcome to The Lowest Crime, the podcast where we dive deep into some of the most impactful and controversial cases from the Netherlands. I'm Eline, and today we're covering one of the darkest days in Dutch history, the 2011 mass shooting in Alphen aan Rijn. On April 9th, 2011, 24-year-old Tristan van der Vlis walked into the Ridderhof shopping center and opened fire with a semi-automatic weapon. Within minutes, he had killed 6 people, wounded 17 others, and then ended his own life. Before we dive into that tragic day, let's first explore the life of Tristan van der Vlis, the troubled young man behind the attack. But before we get into anything at all today, please be aware that we'll be discussing extreme violence, murder, mental health struggles, and suicide. Also, although I always try my very best to bring you all the known facts, I am just an amateur podcast creator, so there is always the chance of me making a mistake. Without further ado, let's get into the story of the Alphen aan Rijn mall shooting. Tristan van der Vlis was born on Friday, June 13th, 1986. Raised by his parents, Hans and Marieke, in a typical 1970s apartment block in Alphen aan Rijn. He grew up in what seemed like a keurig household, respectable, loving and calm. Hans was a painter and art teacher, and Marieke worked as a secretary at a law office. From an early age, Tristan was a quiet child. Not a loner exactly, but someone who often stood apart. When he was 12, Tristan visited a shooting range for the first time in his life, and that moment sparked a lifelong fascination with firearms. A fascination his parents would come to deeply regret encouraging. By the age of 14, his mental health began to decline. He started hearing voices. Growing up in a religious household, the first voice he started hearing was that of God. Soon more voices followed. Spirits, he believed, were real entities, including one of the Columbine shooters. To Tristan, these were not hallucinations, but direct communication. He questioned God's goodness. Why would a loving God allow suffering? Why create humans only to punish them? He even wrote his own version of the Bible, claiming he who talks to God is actually talking to the devil. At home, arguments erupted, between him and his parents and between him and God. He drew monsters, rewrote scripture, and became obsessed with disasters, particularly the 1986 Chernobyl meltdown, which happened the year he was born, as well as the Columbine school shooting. He believed God was evil and the world cursed. Despite his inner turmoil, outside the home, Tristan appeared as just another quiet teen. He joked with classmates, played violent shooting video games, as many teenagers do, and once told a peer that he wanted to become a scherpschutter, a sharpshooter. Having uncles in the military, this didn't raise any eyebrows. Yet, warning signs were there. In his teens, Tristan gave a friend his father's air rifle. The friend shot another boy in the ankle, leading to police involvement. This incident later cost Tristan his first firearm license application. By the age of 20, his mental health deteriorated further. Living alone and struggling, his parents discovered a red notebook filled with suicide plans and goodbye notes. His father, undergoing chemotherapy at the time, called emergency services, and Tristan was admitted to a psychiatric ward under supervision. The diagnosis: psychosis, hallucinations, and schizophrenia. But his treatment was incomplete. He was released after just 15 days. Antipsychotics were only introduced a year later. He often skipped therapy, leaving his parents desperate. Even during apparent recovery, he spent hours researching the Columbine shooting and idolizing its killers, especially Eric Harris. One friend would later say, Eric and Dylan, they were his heroes. In 2008, despite his documented psychiatric history, prior forced hospitalization and suicide attempts, Tristan was granted a legal firearm license. Police missed the red flags about his hospitalization, because they lacked access to the medical records. He legally acquired multiple firearms, including a semi-automatic Smith & Wesson rifle, revolver and pistol. Alongside this, he sank deeper into paranoia and the occult, conducting EVP sessions in graveyards, using Ouija boards, and believing himself a paranormal researcher guided by spirits. At work, first at Brookland and later in Woerden, his behavior became erratic. He flashed colleagues, made shooting gestures, and spoke openly about mass murder. One co-worker anonymously warned management twice, yet no formal action followed. Tristan started preparing in earnest, ordering extra magazines, body armor, and a camouflage outfit. He also put on a t-shirt saying, "Shit happens on Saturdays." He chose a date, Saturday, April 9th, 2011. Eric Harris's birthday, one of the Columbine shooters. It was a beautiful sunny day, just like the day Tristan was born, and the day he would die. The Ridderhof shopping center buzzed with families doing their grocery shopping. Tristan, dressed in camouflage and wearing a bulletproof vest, pulled into the parking lot in his silver Mercedes. Even before entering the mall, he opened fire on his first victim, 42-year-old Nadim Youssef, a man who had fled with his family to the safe Netherlands in 2006 after surviving a 2005 assassination attempt in his home country. He was a political leader of a Kurdish party. As Nadim stepped out of his car at Carmenplein, he was shot dead. After that, Tristan injured 2 more people with his bullets. Ton Sluis, an eyewitness nearby, recalls what happened next. At first, we thought it was a child with a toy gun. Then it got louder. I saw someone walking by in camouflage, maybe 5 meters away. He was just spraying bullets like it felt like a video game. Ton quietly fled into a nearby store and called emergency services. Inside the mall, Tristan's rampage continued. He injured 2 more people and killed Michael Boezart, 49 years old, and Constance Boezart-Bierman, 45 years old. 10-year-old Ashley was shopping with her foster parents. She had just celebrated her birthday days before. They were chatting with someone when the shots rang out. At first we thought it was fireworks, but then both her foster parents collapsed and she screamed. A store owner quickly pulled Ashley into a nearby wool shop for safety. At the supermarket C1000, Tristan caused numerous injuries as he moved through the store. Bouke Witte had just finished shopping at the C1000 with his girlfriend. She walked ahead to the Albert Heijn supermarket, while Bouke returned groceries to their car. He recalls, "When I came back in, I saw shattered glass by the escalator. Suddenly, Tristan opened fire again. Bouke was shot in the leg, armpit and side. He says, "It all happened in seconds. I dove behind a toy vending machine. I thought, if I stay here, I'll die." Bouke managed to flee back into the C1000, where bystanders dragged him to safety. The bullet in his leg caused permanent damage. Fragments lodged into his knee and severed a nerve. Inside 2 other stores, Tristan shot and killed Ali van Doorn, 91 years old, and Frans Deutekom, at 80 years old. In front of the Square Mode store, he killed shop owner Margriet ter Haar, 68 years old. At exactly 12:11 p.m., just 3 minutes after the attack began, Tristan ended the massacre by turning the gun on himself inside the Albert Heijn supermarket at cash register number 2. His body collapsed on the floor. One employee quickly placed a box over his head. Another placed his weapon into a shopping basket. The police response was massive and chaotic. Initially, they feared multiple shooters and bombs, echoes of the Columbine terror. Entire shopping centers were evacuated. Reflecting on that day, Jaco van Hoorn, deputy chief of police at the time, said, "It's the most intense incident I've experienced in 40 years. There were false rumors of multiple shooters and bombs in different shopping malls. It was absolute chaos. Even the most seasoned officers were in shock. That's when I realized the enormity of it all. Incidents like this remind you that you're not just a professional, you're human. Tristan's father, Hans, called police himself after seeing the news reports, fearing the worst. A friend of Tristan, who had known about his plans, came forward the next day but admitted not thinking Tristan would actually go ahead and do it. This friend was later found mentally unfit to stand trial. Tristan's parents were devastated. Placed in a safe house, fearing retaliation, they cooperated fully with the police during long interviews. They struggled to understand what signs they had missed and what more could have been done. Some victims sought blame in Tristan's parents, but the court ruled that they were not responsible for what had happened. People also held Tristan's former employer responsible. It was revealed that the company had known about Tristan's mental health and weapon possession. During a hearing in The Hague, it was disclosed the employer had received an anonymous warning letter, but failed to act or inform Tristan's family or the police. However, the employer was not held criminally accountable. Victims pursued a civil case for unlawful conduct, and compensation was paid out through Tristan's personal liability insurer. Eventually, the Dutch police were found liable for granting a gun license, despite Tristan's psychiatric history. The highest court ordered hundreds of thousands of euros in compensation for victims and survivors. Tristan was buried in secret under police guard. In the years since, survivors have struggled with physical and mental scars. Ton Sluis, who survived, said that he was profoundly changed. He says, "You carry it with you, you wake up with it and you go to bed with it. I'm mentally scarred for life." The events of April 9th, 2011 left a deep impact on many people's lives. It was a day that raised serious questions, not only about mental health care and gun regulations, but also about how warning signs are handled. For the survivors and families of the victims, the consequences didn't end that day. They continued to live with the emotional and physical scars. While legal steps have been taken and responsibility has been acknowledged, for many, the process of healing remains ongoing. And with that, we conclude today's episode of The Lowest Crime. If you found this an interesting episode, feel free to give it a like or subscribe. You can find any images related to the case on the Lowest Crime Instagram account. Thank you all so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.